And everybody, please speak up because the microphone is here. So just make sure you understand you're in a very echoey room. You gotta talk to you.
Okay, so this is the monthly meeting of the ANC 314, the Zoning Design and Development Committee. And we're trying again to do hybrid. So I suggest that we start with the thanks to Jim Feldman, Greg Schmidt, and Eric Rome, with Jim and Greg Bobono, producing a really substantial memo about both the laying out where there are restrictions, making suggestions about how recommending various courses of that. So you have our detailed thanks. And while we're on the subject of that, we worked on it. I suggest that this group consider making a recommendation based on that memo, and maybe Jim may suggest how he'd see it being a recommendation that we set forward to the I actually, you know, in the last meeting, agree with way of Jim's that we ought to challenge this restriction. He's laid out a variety of courses of action. What do you suggest?
I mean, I guess I hadn't thought about this exactly, but if the ANC, I would recommend the ANC adopt a resolution that was note the facts of this no restriction, this part of this property on all the other properties. And side also. And it's really not this he's not going to take their actions and the challenge of removing those restrictions so that all of these properties can be it would, in my view, is a rezoning exclusionary covenant. It was intended to keep it wouldn't be a certain
You recommended in your number of possible back. Just so people can, if you want to tell where it's a vacancy. Yeah, sure. Not finding them. Are there any one or two?
I think the best one that I could me, that's either the PC government have to do this private. If we be telling the government what we failed, and they ought to go to the Terry's Land Company and to agree to lift the restriction, file that, and see what happens after that. That would be but you know. The other would be to see if the city council wants to adopt legislation that would validate covenants to be stored, maybe generally throughout the city or at least in areas that are highly that are partially zoned, commercially zoned, given the current housing shortage, that the city should say isn't much about.
Okay, let me open it up and address the committee. Let me say, I think that there always is some new thing coming just before every monthly meeting, and I think there's a big, very possibly a very big news. And that is that Genhead may be jamming on the gas pedal. I have some suggestions about how we would approach that. So I don't think we should devote the whole meeting debating this, but the issue of restriction is important. See if there's a consensus on the two meetings.
Well, I just wrote a short note to everybody. I think it's a terrific piece of work that you did, but I'm not sure if it's a position. A legal issue that we're not in a position to do something. And where the consequences are unclear. For example, this new zoning legislation that's coming down the road could really become a major problem.
If you are speaking English, it is not coming through.
I'm
It
sorry.
is coming through as gibberish.
Thank you. The possibility of very tall buildings being built on this property, if zoning goes through that the city has basically approved, as I understand it, those covenants may be of some value to the community. And I don't know that we want to go on record with the zoning hanging over our head as supporting removing covenants. Silence may be a better position to take.
Reaction.
A couple of things. First of all, I'll join in complimenting Jim and his small, I would compliment Jim and his small firm for the work that they've done, and add that in talking about this with my zoning attorney that I use in my work, she concurs that the recommendations for the best way to proceed are exactly the ones that you talked about. I would add to that, relative to your suggestion, that the RAISE committee, Racial and Social Equity Committee, it will be coming out with a email to the ANC that essentially supports the position that Jim has talked about in the memo, and urges the ANC to join us in recognizing that the deed restriction is an unfortunate artifact of our history of exclusion that has no place in the present moment when we as a community aspire to be more inclusive. And that's what they're recommending. But to that point, I don't think, regardless of where that zoning goes, that we should be relying on this exclusionary covenant from 100 years ago to make zoning decisions today.
Of course,
Whether what the height, massing, et cetera, ends up in that zoning should be discussed on its own merits. And this covenant should be removed just because it's an evil thing.
Others?
Yeah, I have a fundamental thing, big bang away. I don't think this committee or the ANC. I don't think this committee or the ANC should be in the business making announcements about what residents want until you ask what residents. And if residents say, and I think most of them would, to Ron's point, they would say, no, we don't want this, then fine. But the ANC is a body, doesn't have a mandate to make decisions for the community. So it's heard. And we have a big problem, as Jordan pointed out, which is this community was told the zoning is going to be MU4 over and over and over again. And people relied on that, and they were told we're going for it to be scaled, and the community relied on that. And what we now get is jammed down our throats, NC, N19, and N8, which no one bought into. Randy didn't buy into that, no one bought into it.
Okay, let me just address this. I completely understand what you're making. And you'll see in the next few minutes discussion that I think that we need to, we're going to have to run at a very high tempo to stay ahead of the process. But what we're talking about here is a recommendation of this committee to the ANC. The issue of when the ANC, how the ANC takes that up, and whether we can get survey stuff, focus groups, meetings in first, is a matter that we can handle at the ANC level. If we keep, and I guess I would also say to you, there is a way to keep gaming the pieces of the
puzzle that we're playing with, but it's already an immensely complex political and policy process, and it seems to me that the right thing to do is the right thing to do is this on the restriction, this on the zoning, this on the process that gets us not here. If we make it as complex as the city, jam it, you know, try to play pieces against each other, we're going to be lost in it. So I think that, you know, we need to make a decision on merits. Anybody? And
Yeah, I think Jim's analysis is right on, spot on. I think you hit exactly all the right points. I'm particularly concerned about the implications broader than just this community, this civic center here. Because if the no apartments restriction is applied across the board, not only in our neighborhood, but I suspect in other neighborhoods too, that's going to be a serious problem. The whole small area plan was predicated on the fact that we would have housing on the avenue. And if we're not going to do that, if we're going to retreat from that, I think that's a mistake. And so I think the only way to deal with this is on the broader policy issues. I don't think it's a legal issue, George. I think it's a policy issue, basically. And that the ANC, I think, should be stepping out and saying, this is what, from a policy standpoint, the district should be doing. And it may require legislation. Maybe that's the best way to do it. The best and most efficient way to do it. But I think going to the Cherry Chase Land Company first is exactly the right step. Now, I suspect that this same restriction existed south of Livingston too. And that.
Can I say that for a second? Definitely existed on the Cherry Chase Land Company.
Right.
Sites south of Livingston, at least south of Military.
Right.
But I'm sure it is.
And apartment buildings have been built there. And so I think that's a very persuasive argument that this restriction no longer has any legs today, that it really should be relegated to history. Now, in terms of the zoning, it's not a done deal yet. That's what we got to keep in mind. The zoning is, first of all, a proposal only from the Office of Planning. It has to go to the Zoning Commission to be approved. There are several steps in the process that have to be done before that becomes the city's policy. And that's not, so far as I know, DMPED is not taking a position on that. It's just the Office of Planning proposal. And
I think
we've talked about
this.
we've talked about some concerns that we have about that. And so I think we ought to move forward on that issue as well. But with regard to the restrictions, I think it would be a huge mistake to move forward, not only with the civic core, but with the small area plan. With that hanging over us, it would not be a productive way to develop this area of the city, no matter what kind of restrictions, other restrictions we want to place on it. The deed restriction, by the way, does not specify anything with regard to height or density or any of those kinds of things. It only says no apartments. So, okay.
So Lisa, you wanted to say something?
Just to say in terms of our recommendation to the ANC, it could be your recommendation. It's whatever the group would do. So it's not necessary. So just keep that in mind, that it's really up to the group to kind of say what they want to say to you, recommendation. I know what race committee is going to recommend because I'm sitting on that committee, but the ANC, and I talked to Peter about this, I want the group's recommendation. I really do. That's why we assembled you guys, because you're diverse voices in the community with diverse expertise and your opinion matters. So, but I am also a little, I understand your point. I have the same concern that you do. Not to say that other commissioners do, but I think the recommendation coming from this group would be pretty powerful.
So I have an issue with anybody who's maybe we didn't even know about this.
So that's the start of our conversation that I will definitely have with you after this meeting. There are ANC committees all across this city, hundreds of them, and they make recommendations to the ANC all the time. This group has the authority to do that.
Then the next question follows. How can we make a recommendation so we know residents think? One. And two, I mean, I'm a Jordan on this one. Problem, and I'm all for affordable housing. I don't like it. The ANC has been playing its ace card every time. Every time. They agree to the upfront without knowing.
Okay. And I
No, let me finish.
no, we've heard this history.
Let me finish my thought. You asked me to be on this movie, I'm reflecting, by the way, on the last week.
And it's not that, Jonathan, it's the committee has an hour to meet. We gotta stay on agenda and on task.
The other thing is this, Don.
That's all, we have to stay on task.
A lot of suspicion. This commission, previous. And, but the problem is, we face a city that's moving forward, making big decisions. Right. If we end up conversations about licenses, we are going to end up deciding on the very issues that Jordan's point is.
Yeah, and it's pushing through zoning. No one contemplates.
We're gonna deal with this in just a
Okay,
minute.
so residents should be able to say, look, we don't want that, we do want that, and these are the reasons we don't.
We agree with you, and we're gonna get to that. We agree with you.
Which is, to me, I can't agree with you. I don't see that I would say. But it seems to me that by taking care of, you're getting rid of one of their motivations. So that, you know, it seems like that's one of the things. I also think that as a legal matter, in the end, it's valid, but, you know, that's. Susan, do you want to say something? Could I just say something in advance? Just, I should have said this at the outset, because we have changed the co-chairs. Peter has thank you, graciously agreed, stepped out and assisted the ANC at its Monday meeting for Susan.
Well, thank you all. But I just want to say I agree with Ron, Jim, and Peter that we really need to stay on target on whether or not face this restriction, and that's the agenda item. And I think this group should make a recommendation to the ANC what we think of the restriction. And I think it's really helpful if we would stick just to that and came up with some position on that use.
So could we, could I, Jamie, say something briefly about that? It seems to me it's there are two dimensions to this question. One is about process. And this committee having the expertise to understand what the implications are of either having or not having that cover in play. And it seems to me our expertise is all about gaming that, coming up with it, not gaming it, but analyzing and understanding what the process implications are, because this is not something that exists in a vacuum. So wrestling with that, those two aspects of this, I think is really part of our job. So I just wanted to mention.
I would just add, Jordan, you know, you could be throwing away the baby with bathwater also, because as Randy was saying, this covenant prohibits apartment dwellers. It's very specific. Didn't want poor people here. And so if the covenant stays in place, you can't even have a two-story, it's got nothing to do with big buildings. You couldn't even have a 2-story, 3-unit building. That's an apartment building. You couldn't build that anywhere along Connecticut Avenue.
Say here. Supporter per se. I just think being silent and letting the attorney for the city.
Which they are discussing.
Yes, okay, I mean,
They are.
And I think we don't intend the consequences coming out of the position
So let me, very short comments. Want to make, but I think we need to make a decision about this and move on to the rest of the agenda. The one I failed to get. Do you want to say something? Anybody?
Everybody can speak up, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've been trying to.
Possible to, if you're sitting in the back and somebody's not speaking, we could say louder. And maybe you guys could say that. You can hear.
So one thing I'd like to say loud is, I don't think this is binding. I mean, I can see a scenario where the community, the ANC says, look, we don't like this covenant, but we don't like it for zoning. Like, this is a negotiation. Like, we want to have apartments there, we want to have the corporate apartments there, but you're jamming this NC 19 down our throats. We don't like it. That's not what was on the table when the small area plan was presented. You want to work with us, we'll work with you. We'll work with you on the restricted covenant. We'll get people around that. There's a lot of people who like it. Right? There's a whole group of people who are trying to keep it enforced. So we should be negotiating, not just saying, okay, dropping my eggs. Well,
I have a question. Small area plan, when it was approved by the council, what does that in fact mean? What does it mean? The council approved the small area.
I think it means it became part of the comprehensive plan for the district. I think.
Okay. what does that mean?
The zoning commission cannot do anything inconsistent with the small area plan. The zoning commission cannot adopt a zone that is inconsistent with the small area plan and the comprehensive
They're powerless to themselves. I wouldn't bank. They're playing ball with small area.
plan. Well, I mean, it is the law. If they ignore the law, there's nothing we can do.
That's also the argument when the zoning commission has been sued for, whatever. It's generally that they're taking actions that aren't consistent with the comprehensive plan. That is.
People lose it.
Yeah, and people win those suits sometimes. Yeah, but
Is it law? Small area plan now, laws. We use the word law.
to the, I don't think I use the word law, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not allowed to use the word law.
Who said, Randy? This is law or is it?
The interpretation is that the zoning commission cannot do anything, has to act not inconsistent. Double negative, not inconsistent with the small area plan or the comprehensive. That's,
This is sort of one dot. In talking with the OP zoning staff, they very much said that they believe they can only go so far. Now, as it turns out, in this the proposed zone they have for this property, it's way farther than anybody in this community wants to go. But they were clear that they could only go so far because of the comprehensive plan, because of the Chevy Chase small area plan that was adopted into the comprehensive. I think with regard to this issue, zoning not obeying or having a generous interpretation of what the comprehensive says, again, it's one of these cases where we could try to game this, but like we're a little voluntary group. This is a little voluntary appendage to a little voluntary group. Playing fancy politics at a level we can't play at. I think we the best we can do is to possibly anything.
It's our community.
I know, but you don't think we have to. That is, that we're trying to do, but it is a very hard thing to do in this city. And so, I mean, getting fancy and saying, okay, this pond move here and this here is a recipe for our ending up confused. There's already so on that. Very good. Did you get to where you wanted to go with that?
Close enough.
All right.
I'm agree.
Yeah.
I've had a question. Every once in a while, somebody pops up and says something about Truth's foot building of 160 units. Where did this idea come from? You've never talked about it in the ANC Race Committee. I imagine you haven't talked about this committee as well. So where does this idea of jamming a huge building and our approach coming?
Well, we have seen, we released to the community the draft zoning that included draft zoning for this site. That proposal allows up to 83 feet 6 inches of structure on this site and an 80% lot occupancy, covering 80% of the property.
Sorry, this is where?
The Office of Planning's proposed zone for this property.
Peter, isn't that on the agenda?
This is,
It is, so,
Why don't we add that discussion into?
okay.
this is one with small area.
No, we don't, both of us do not think it's in line with the small area, but that's where, you asked where it came, not whether it's, you know. I think we ought to take a vote, whether this committee is willing to, we'll work on the wording, we'll pass it around, but it'll be along the lines of what Jim Feldman proposed. I move that we pass a Feldman written recommendation to the ANC on treatment of the deed restriction on the Community Center Library property. Second.
I second the Feldman Act.
All in favor of moving this forward to the? Yeah, Cal, you're actually helping us, but you're not on. So,
No,
Not on this committee.
keep going.
yeah, so what do we got? Yeah. Okay, all opposed. And you abstain?
Do call for extensions, call for extensions.
And abstentions.
Do you want to see anybody's online?
They can't vote.
Rashid, I thought Rashid.
Anasta, yeah. Hit admit on this one.
We also need to take.
Agnieszka and Rashid said he was going to come on.
He was on there.
Was he there?
Anushka, can you turn on your camera so we can see your vote? And Rasheen, any committee members? Anushka, did you hear the resolution? Were you able to hear it? The motion?
Sorry, I was just distracted for a minute.
Okay, so Peter, can you repeat the motion for her?
This is a proposal to move forward as a recommendation for this committee to the full ANC. A Jim Feldman written recommendation that the ANC ask the city government to do everything within its power to remove the restriction.
Peter, it's really hard to hear you. I know people in the comments have been commenting, but it's just almost impossible to hear you. If you could just type into the chat box what the motion is. So I think that's why Rashid left, because it was very hard to hear.
Agnieszka, it's Peter. I'm coming right up to the machine. So the proposal is the following, that this committee vote to move forward as a recommendation to the full ANC, a Jim Feldman written resolution or recommendation that the ANC asks the city government to do everything in its power to remove the restriction.
And what's the vote so far? Are people like by the last one?
Yes, ma'am. We need your vote. Either yes, no, or abstain.
Second to last.
I am going to abstain. I'm sorry, I'm preparing for trial and do not feel sufficiently informed. I've read Jim's memo, but I feel insufficiently informed.
Okay.
Cast a knowledgeable vote.
We're gonna make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Soon?
Can you? Ryan, can you use that? Just.
I'm not reading on the.
They can see it.
Yeah, I agree.
But no, the Feldman.
Thank you.
I just didn't write down.
Yeah, you need to write down who did what.
Well, let me just bear with me. I just want to make sure I've got everybody in the right text.
Yeah.
Two, you and Gordon. So it was.
He dropped
Sorry,
off.
I just.
He's not on. Yeah, yeah, he dropped off.
Yeah, I was, is there an opportunity for a friendly amendment?
The vote has been cast. You'd have
I
to,
think we did it. I mean,
no, wait a minute, hang on. According to parliamentary procedures, he asked the question. You cannot do a friendly amendment because the vote has already passed. What you could do is reconsider. It's called a motion to reconsider. Okay, so just in terms of procedure, Robert Rules of Order, once a motion carries, it's carried. If you want to go back and readdress it, it's a motion to reconsider. And you would have to propose a new motion to reconsider that motion, and that would have to pass before you carry the motion.
Well, this took about 3 hours.
Yes.
I would be interested in hearing this one. Okay, but just can I, before you do this, Peter, is Rasheen on and did we? get-
He's not on.
You want
He's
me-
not on.
You want me to ping him and ask him to come on?
Send it to me.
He dropped off a while ago because it was very hard to hear. And he put a message in the chat saying he couldn't hear and dropped off about 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
Your motion being a motion to reconsider.
I'm offering a motion to quickly reconsider and enact this vote as soon as we understand the exact state of the deed, as Mr. Benderly suggested, thereby remaining silent until we know whether this deed is going to remain in place and whether the lawyers for the city,
That's the question we're trying to
the deed
answer.
restriction.
That's the question we're trying to
voting
answer.
on, is suggesting that the city take
Right.
action to challenge the deed restriction.
And Mr. Benderly, weren't you suggesting that we remain silent for the time being? I'm suggesting that we remain silent until there's a definitive answer from the lawyers from the city and we have a clear understanding of how those deed restrictions will go forward.
Is there a second? Discussion. Discussion.
I would just like to say, it would take a year or more, the lawyers in DC to really move on this. There's a possibility it could take a
They're gonna go forward with the RFP, they have to make this decision.
not necessarily.
No, they don't. Exactly. So I've talked to, I've talked to OAG and DEMPED. They don't have to move on this at all to go forward with the project. They don't.
So
They don't. They don't.
So they would potentially go forward with the project, adhering to the deed restriction and potentially doing something that we wouldn't agree with. And your point of view is that we wouldn't have gotten that message across that we don't want the deed restriction in time.
Or they would go ahead with it.
And also, just to clarify the situation, it actually doesn't matter what conclusion what we would be urging them to do is do whatever they can in accordance with these ways to get rid of the deed restriction. If they concluded, the DC government concludes legally we don't have a leg to stand on, they're not going to do it and they shouldn't do it. And that would be okay. I can't imagine how they could conclude that, but if they did, they would.
If
But
they
they
could
can't
also,
also, on the other side, they can't just say, we don't like the deed restriction as it disappears, because that's also not, this is a deed restriction. They're not, they can't just have it disappear either way.
but we are, I mean, a couple of things. One is, we're just urging them to start the process and see what they can do as different things. But the second thing, back to my earlier point, I don't see any situation in which this community should want that deed to stay in place. It is a bad thing from a bad moment in our past, and we should take the right position, the ethical position to get rid of it.
Randy,
I
do
agree
you
with
have a
that.
comment?
I agree.
So does everyone, okay, community?
I just want to say that there's nothing unethical or bad about positions that apartment buildings in the state, they were promoting. It wasn't to keep out black. It was really because single family developments didn't want large multi-family buildings next to them.
I urge you to go to the
Yeah.
town of Chevy Chase's website and their history section where they quote ads from Chevy Chase land about how apartment buildings were keeping the wrong element out of the community. It was very specifically to keep less well-to-do people out of the neighborhood.
I would only say. And that is the history. Another thing, I mean, I also believe that this covenant could have been done to try to protect the area's public space for the expansion of the school, whatever. But be that as it may, there are 2 points. One is, despite what happened over 100 years ago, I would never be intended in making this. The reality is, Chevy Chase is not this one block, nor is it simply just 11 blocks down around the path, and 7 of those 11 filled with apartments. So, you know, rather than focusing on 100 years ago, let's look at where we are today, which is we have a lot of apartment buildings here, and they are generally low cost. Secondly, as to the idea that if we, you know, keep the covenant, DemPed will then force an 90-foot building on us in a small area. Another thing that I found very disturbing about their proposal is that they want to take up 80% of the land on this site, which pretty much takes away all our open space, all our recreation space. And I find that very disturbing, as well as the 90 feet. And at least the covenant restricts them in terms of how much land they can take.
Right. Wait.
That's the thing. It's 80% of the house in the center of the library from the house front. It provides no restriction for that at all.
Right.
Okay, so it doesn't protect the open space. That's the one thing it definitely doesn't do.
And
But-
in fact, the 80% is a reduction from the current zone. You can build a non-residential 100% lot coverage on any block, including this one, under the current zone. The 80% that's in the NC zone is a reduction in that lot coverage. And it may not be enough to get us what we want, but just to keep in mind, that is a reduction of lot coverage from the current zone.
This young lady here, then Robert Gordon. Didn't you have your hand up?
But I think I came in late to the conversation, so I'm not exactly sure where. Oh, okay, I came in late to the conversation, so I'm exactly sure where it is, but I would just comment on the use of the space, the open space. And just walking in here, the playground's being used, the basketball court's being used, the sort of tennis walls being used at this moment. And my family, my kids grew up like a block and a half from this space. And it's very important, that open space, those playing fields are very important to kids in this community and to other kids who come from elsewhere to play, especially basketball. So I'm really wondering what happens to that and the public purpose of this land if 80% of the land is covered with any building.
Robert? I'll bring it to you.
Thank you. The current zoning for this property is MU3A, which provides for only 60% lot coverage, just so you know. The second point I'd like to make, MU3A, look it up. The second point I'd like to understand is how you can read the minds of people who died over 100 years ago and say that the deed restriction was racist. Even Mr. Feldman, I don't believe, thinks that, and he's done the research. What's that?
We said it was exclusionary, not racist.
All right, and no question it was exclusionary. It excluded apartment buildings. That's what it did. Perhaps the reason it excluded apartment buildings is they didn't want an apartment building abutting the lots that they had. In those days, in 1909, the roads were not even paved, the lots were not even occupied. The housing, those properties had to be sold, and perhaps they just didn't want an apartment building sitting right next to potentially residential single-family homes. That could have been the motivation. A second potential motivation could have been they conglomerated 4 parcels into one in order to sell it at a small price to the city for the extension of the school, which had doubled in size. So please, that's enough.
Really have a lot about it. I have had at the beginning at the same time. Who put their hand up first person?
Okay, go on, Cal.
So, I have 2 things to say, and they're questions. One question for you, Peter Lynch, one question for you, Robert, which is, what possible advantage is there to delaying this? Because regardless of the outcome of this, it seems to me that, having the desire known of the committee is regardless of how long it takes to go through that process, seems to have, to me, extreme value. And so I just wondered about that.
Good question.
And in response to that, my understanding is that some of those deed restrictions were in place in the apartment buildings south of military base, south of Livingston. And I trust Mr. Benderly's assessment that if we make a point on this too quickly without understanding the exact state of play of the deed restriction here, then as Mr. Guy said, we show our cards too quickly, and we still could, and I'm proposing, observe our vote until the point when we know exactly what this deed restriction means.
That could be well after the project starts.
Yeah, definitely. Jerry?
Yeah, I just have one data point that I'd just like to bring out because I think it's interesting, which changes a lot of the misconception that people might have. And this is using the GIS application that the Office of Planning provided with the 2020 census data. So in the 28 census blocks that were in the study area for the small area plan, these 28 census blocks, 3,182 people live in the study area for the small area plan. And of those, 1,405 live in the multi-dwelling unit buildings and 1,775 live in the detached or semi-detached units. So when people think that this is a single family area, it's not. It's about a 53 to 47% split between those that live in the detached and semi-detached and those that live in the apartment buildings.
Wow.
That's just something that's interesting.
That is, thank you.
All right, let's get to sort this out. Because I
Talk up, Peter.
do think that there's another big topic that we need to talk about. So my understanding, Lisa, you're going to be the parliamentarian, is that we are voting on whether to reconsider, or have we? And then if we do reconsider, then we are amending, or perhaps amending, the resolution that I advance. Is that where you think we are, Peter?
Not quite. I am proposing to take Mr. Benderly's advice on this.
Wait.
You have to, if you are trying to edit, right. If you are trying to edit the motion that we just made,
We just voted.
voted on, you have to get the body to agree to reconsider that motion first. The body may not agree to do that.
So I think the vote
Okay,
is first on whether we are to reopen the question. And then
Right.
If we do reopen the question, you make your friendly amendment, your amendment, or your.
Right.
Is that?
You can't amend it you can't amend it in advance. The body has to agree to amend it. So the motion is on to reconsider the motion that just carried.
Okay, so may I, and I just ask the committee to not reopen this because I think we need to move on, and I think that we, in effect, in voting what.
I second.
I would call a question.
Right.
A vote on reconsideration, all in favor of reconsidering.
I'd love to do machine things. I'd like to have this good.
We will, Jonathan, we will get to the people online. We got to do this by process and procedure. Okay.
So that's yes. All against reconsideration. Abstaining.
And then Anishka
And
and Rasheen. Rasheen, you have to come on camera for the vote. If you're going to vote in this round, I have to see you.
Okay, I'm on camera.
Okay.
So the
Could
vote
you-
is on Peter's motion, Peter Lynch's motion to reconsider.
Right.
Yeah.
So I vote for it, for Peter Lynch's motion to reconsider.
I also vote for it.
Okay.
Oh boy, we're close, but let's try this again.
How many no's did you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, to 5. The motion to reconsider goes down.
Okay, so move on. Was there any abstentions?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see if I can introduce this next.
Thank you both.
thank you, Trevor, for the.
Yeah.
No problem.
We're practicing for, we're gonna go hybrid, full commission, May 8th, so we're gonna just practice. I think this is something that we still don't have absolutely nailed down, but I think that the evidence is mounting that the city is going to push forward a process, a very constrained public engagement process, and then jam right forward. Robert Gordon was spotted online, a notice in the DC Register posted.
Peter.
Posted April 14th that had the mayor giving DemPed the authority to seek bids for the community center library. We have been going back and forth trying to get intelligence about what in the world, is this just administrative formality, or does this signal that the city is going to jam forward very quickly? We have not yet gotten to the right people, but we know that the mayor is bringing in developers and DemPed and saying, get it built. So I think that not just in this, we don't know about this project, we know about other projects that are further along. And so I think there is a real possibility that that DemPed simply drops on us something called our RFP. It consists of a meeting or two, and that they then say, we'll take the transcripts, we'll plaster it to the RFP, and we'll write the RFP. Thank you very much. This ANC and this committee has been working very hard to put in place a more robust, longer term conversation, including surveys, including a comprehensive survey, including a focus groups, including real town meetings that we did not get with the small area planning process. The trick here is that we need to be ready to give at least the highlights of what this group, this ANC, and this community want in the narrow gauge process that might just be dropped on us in the next few weeks, while we continue to work to build out the thing that we should do, which is take the time, get the city to back off and take the time to hear from the community, which has not been heard today, or not adequate. So I'm going to propose something that's you may be rejected, but I think is the right way to go on this to protect us.
Peter, before you get into that, can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that I want people to know is this is something that I've been talking to Peter with over the course of some time in my conversations with DENPED, Jill Stucker in particular. They've never really given us a date when the process is going to begin, but I definitely believe and I know that they're working towards implementing the process very soon. So the notice that was from the mayor to, what is that notice called? Do you know?
It's.
I don't want to say the wrong thing. There's a technical term for it, but it was on the public register that allows DENPED basically to sign on behalf, I believe, of the mayor in terms of the project. I talked to Gil Stucker specifically about that, and he acknowledged that is the first step in the process.
Yeah.
So they are beginning this process now. I know they're working with the community engagement contractor that's going to be contracted for this process. I got a call from Jill Stucker today, kind of giving me an overview of the interview process that the contractor will do with various community groups and organizations. So like one, Chevy Chase Citizens Association, one is going to be the ANC. So they're already starting the process. So I think it's critical that this committee starts looking kind of beyond some of the things that we've been talking about and start getting ready for that RFP process, because it is coming and it is probably coming quicker than we all have anticipated. So
have any of the ANC members objected to the fact that this is being steamrolled?
I have an uncanny knack for forgetting to not do reply alls. So when Jill sends some of these notes, I write back.
Yeah,
I basically use it.
We've asked them.
I have sent back. Jill Stucker has written us and meaning to tell Lisa that I think he's full of shit and installing or is going to run over us. I send reply alls and he gets the message and he gets terribly.
But has the ANC gone on record?
A resolution.
We haven't, I believe, done a resolution to the process, but
You know, we haven't. We did the
Yeah.
surplus thing. Maybe this is
Yeah.
something that this group wants to recommend that the ANC do.
yeah.
Okay, but I think, so, that's absolutely on point of what we should do. I want to suggest something in addition. So, do you have other things, John? So, look, we should have done this different. The city should have done this different. But the best way to protect this, and I think part of a recommendation saying that we object to a short-term process is a fine thing that this committee could push forward to the ANC's recommendation.
Talk
I'm going
about
to suggest
Peter.
something that is a little dicey, but let's see if you hear me out on this. There are a few big issues that we know there's a broad consensus in the community about, at least a broad consensus that where the city is headed on this is not acceptable to us. And the question is, could we, in the next few weeks, put together what I would like to call teams of rivals, people on this committee who take varying positions on these, with this assignment? Go in a room, tell us whether there is an area of common ground, and give us specifics of what it would be, and report back to the ANC in 2 weeks. The idea here is that
if we get this thing jammed down our throats, that record that goes into the RFP at least speaks to issues like height density parking, open space, architectural compatibility with the rest of our neighborhood, and of housing and affordable housing. My fear is that if we don't do this, my fear is that if we argue about, have we fully heard from the community yet? We will hear from the community too late, and that we will not have it on the record that DemHead will take seriously. I think that then we should keep pressing on this, the matter of doing a full community engagement process, if only to shame the city for not doing it. So, and I have suggestions of what those teams of rivals look like. Go ahead, Jim.
I just have one question. I hear all the things that they're saying. The one thing that I don't completely understand is they don't have zoning. The zoning currently, as somebody says, MU3A or whatever it is for this property. And I don't think they're going to want to ask for people to submit proposals for that. So don't they have to do something with the zoning before they can send out an RFP?
So, yeah, Susan could speak to that, I think.
They don't.
No, they
Yeah,
can
they
take
don't.
the situation as it is and put out an RFP, and if developers want to do a zoning change, then it's up to the developers. The developers who win the bid then are chosen by the deputy mayor's office, have to go through the city council, and then they have authority to petition to the Board of Zoning Adjustment and the zoning commission that, for example, the restriction be lifted. Or that you go up to a higher height or higher density or higher lot coverage. But it's at that point that the city doesn't have to do anything prior to the RFP. They can just take it as it is.
Can I say just one follow-up, because this is what I haven't understood this, but doesn't that limit the number of developers who are going to be willing to participate in it, because they don't know at that point, they got to invest the money in developing a proposal and they don't know whether they're going to get the zoning or not?
Developers are used to having to go to at least the Board of Zoning Adjustment, if not the zoning commission. And that is just a normal part of the process.
I suspect also that if I was DemHead, I would include the draft NC zone as part of the RFP, saying this has not been set down yet, or maybe will have been set down by the time the RFP goes out, but this is where it's headed. So your proposal should be consistent, or at least be informed by that. So, I mean, there are ways they can go forward that would remove that, the risk for the development.
Let me go back to this idea. I mean, Jonathan, there's a huge argument that we haven't heard. This would be yet another step of trying to intuit the community before we've heard from them. My argument for doing this is that this is not a process that we endorsed. In fact, the more I think about Jordan's thing, saying we don't endorse this process is not that's a wise thing to do. But we know certain things that are true of this community. We don't know the exact number, but we know nobody wants a building as big as what the proposed zoning suggests. And I want to be sure we say it instead of arguing among ourselves while the city runs a process that they claim is a community engagement process, and that they will claim they have heard from us because they have taken a transcript of some damn hearing they heard and stuck it on the bottom of the RFP. And so I think that this is a place where I ask people to not let us argue among ourselves, but to do at least a first cut attempt, say, on a few high-level topics where this community is as opposed to the city.
Let me go back to a combination of what you said and what I suggested. I think what you're proposing here is it's important. We have to do a survey, something like a survey. But I think in terms of priority, it's more important for the ANC to go on record about the process. The process is moving too fast. And I think that is far more critical than this people having an instant input, because if they slow the process down, we can get real input. And I would propose, and I guess I should make a motion, that the committee recommends to the ANC that they go on record with the mayor, with all members of the city council, opposing the process as it is currently laid out to us. Right.
Second,
Yeah.
discussion.
Let me just ask this question. It's not that I support this, but what if the city says, so what? We're now on record as saying we don't take this process as credible. And the city says, so what?
Well, you know what? Let's try. Let's not give up before we try. And we need to go to the mayor directly. We need to go to the council directly. And not just Ward 3, but Ward 4 and everybody. And we need to go on record that this process is steamrolling us and we object. And if we don't do that, we deserve to get whacked big time by the city.
I just have one, I mean, I would have trouble with this only because I don't know what the RFP process, my RFP or your, whoever's RFP it is, I don't actually know what that process is, and the city hasn't yet done anything. So it does seem to me the position we should be in is telling the city, this is what we want you to do. And instead of saying we hate what you're doing when they haven't officially done anything, is better to say this, let's tell them what we want them to do. So that would be my.
What I would ask for is a friendly amendment to your proposed motion, in that we do not say our RFP, that we keep the motion as you originally suggested, the process, because to me, the process does not start where we are now. It goes from soup to nuts. I would be very supportive of this because this is what we've done informally and in some ways formally with the city. We've continued, and today I sent a letter to Anita Kozart. I copied the mayor, I copied our at-large council members, I copied the ward council members, everyone on our ANC, asking for them to come to our May 10th meeting to talk about the draft text amendment, which we will hopefully get to on the agenda. So we have done this informally and sometimes formally, but a composite resolution can absolutely say that. I was going to, suggest that when it comes down to the hearing, at some place, we do have to do that. We can also put in the resolution what we want them to see. It could be and this ANC is known for very comprehensive resolutions. So we could say what we don't like, what we have not been happy with, and what we want to see going forward, including that process into our RFP, which, we have some information on what's going to happen there.
But
that's just my comment.
The single most important thing that I think needs to be stressed, and this is my view of it, is that we want input into the process. The community wants input. The
Which we
ANC
have
wants input.
constantly said to them,
That is the main
Absolutely.
thrust.
Yeah.
I'm totally supportive of stressing that the process is flawed and it should be different. But I think we need to go this partially go down the path that Peter started to describe at the same time, because frankly, we have been complaining about the process for 2 years now. All right, Peter's very good at that. And what's happened right now is that we're very worried that what's going to happen in this process is just what Peter says, that we're going to get ghosted by OP, we're gonna get ghosted by NEPED, and they're gonna go ahead because they, in their view, let's just be charitable for a moment. In their view, there has been years of community public engagement. There is a small area plan that is in place that some people have a problem with, but it's in place and it reflects the ANC's approval, it reflects the council's approval. So they feel like they've done what they have to do so they can go ahead. And they're used to having ANCs be suspicious of what's going on. So they are comfortable ignoring us. So
I made it very clear that I think Peter's correct. I mean, we have to move in the direction of a survey, call it what you want. I'm just saying that the priority is, it is critical to go on record about the process. They're two separate tracks.
Yeah.
Not one doesn't negate the other.
Right, we just can't wait.
Except maybe as a priority for spending time. We've got to do the notification of our opposition to the process first. That is, if that hasn't already been done, that has to be
I
done.
agree, but I think I hope we can do them
So
simultaneously.
can we deal with the motion?
Well, the motion is on the floor.
What, I'd like to know
Yeah.
actually what exactly the motion is.
Well, so it sounds as if whose motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, is Jordan's motion?
It's a motion on the
Okay,
floor.
okay, so,
Yeah.
Actually, my suggestion here is that we not, because if we do the process that I'm talking about right away, it's going to take several weeks. And I think the logic of sending forward a recommendation to the ANC that says something like this, this committee recommends to the full ANC that it make clear to the city that it objects to the decision-making process around the preparing for the RFP, community center library, and that the ANC tasked the committee with coming up with a framework of what are the major points that we want to see in that RFP. But I think getting the message from this committee to the ANC that we object now to the current process that's underway is more important than getting this team of rivals idea I have started, because that's going to take, even if everybody agreed to, it's going to take several weeks. So
the ANC passed a resolution back in January. And the resolution was, don't move the ball forward. We haven't had community engagement. We don't know what we're buying. It hasn't been explained to us, and we're concerned about this process steamrolling, right? So we're now nearly May, and we're talking about passing another resolution, which I think makes perfect sense. But I think the message should be clear. In January, we said we didn't want to see surplusing. We're telling you now in April that we don't want to see this process, and I agree with you, Lisa, the whole ending process, and you could say RFP and including all other parts. But it needs to be clear that the message needs to be clear. This community hasn't been engaged, and they are going to steamroll. I mean, does anybody have any doubt about it?
What's the answer to the response? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. If comes back and says, you asked for us to delay, what's it called, surplus. The ANC asked to delay surplusing until there was community engagement. We delayed surplusing and we switched from the track we're on to our RFP track, which is public engagement. What's our response?
Well, one response is that there's been no public engagement so far, and what we have heard is that what we have heard is this is a very short-term process.
But-
1 meeting, 2 meetings, and that's simply not enough. It's not.
I'm all for all of that, but they haven't actually formally done anything. They haven't, they've just sat on that NC-19 thing, haven't formally done anything with that. They haven't formally started this. It's, to me, the way to do it is not saying we object to your sitting and not doing anything, which is all they've done so far, but tell them, this is what we want you to do.
Well, let me just say this. We have asked them to engage with us, to engage with the community
Yeah.
before all of this got started. So it's not necessarily fair to say they're just sitting back waiting for their RFP process, because we've made it very clear prior to RFP starting, prior to them going to the next step, that we have community engagement. And we talked about what that meant to us. We talked to them about helping us with surveys. We talked to them about helping us getting a contractor. We talked to them about the multiple charrettes, and people didn't like that word, charrettes, community meetings. So we have been consistently asking for DMPED, OP, to meet with us, to meet with the community, to start this engagement process. The one thing that I've told Peter, I've told the ANC, and I've said this at community members, I am so fearful that we're going to run against a brick wall and we're going to be hit with this process before we've had a chance to do that engagement with the community. And we made that very clear to DMPED. I'm not going to say stall. Their reaction has been no action, which is an inaction. So I think is within the ANC's absolute right to come out with a resolution. And like I would say, not just start at this point, but we have been asking for this from the beginning of the process to where we are currently, and we have gotten no response. We've gone to council members. That's why I had Kenyon McDuffie come to this, ANC meeting, is for him to also hear, he's over DMPED, for him to also hear and understand, the roadblocks that this agency has given the community. And it's not that people in the community are all saying, we don't want this, but there's parameters around what they want. And I don't understand why DMPED refuses to meet us halfway there. Now, we do have the RFP process coming. We'll see what that is, but I have a glimpse into what that's going to be. And the community is not going to find that to be sufficient. It's pretty much what Commissioner Gosselin said. It is going to probably be 1 or 2 big 3-4 hour meetings on a various scope of topics. That's going to be very difficult for the community to get engaged with that. That's not going to be sufficient.
And I don't think, Jim, I think if this were a rational process, we would wait, we would be presented with we, the city, intend to do X, Y, and Z, and then we, the community, would get to say, well, we don't think it's good enough, or we'd modify it this way, or blah. It ain't gonna happen that way. I mean, this thing's gonna get dropped on us like a
I
bomb.
just want to say, I agree with you on that. To me, the important point is telling them what we want them to do.
Yeah.
As opposed, we can also object to specific things that they've already done. But what I don't want to do is object to things that they haven't yet done, but we're afraid they're going to do. Let's tell them, instead of assuming they're already going to do that, let's say, this is what you should be doing. This is what we think you should be doing.
Okay, my only part of that is getting even a taste of that done in a few weeks is going to be, I suspect if we move on to the thing I'm suggesting, we'll discover it's going to take, there will be a lot of disagreement and it'll be a very hard process. I would love to try it, but I do think that what Lisa and I, and what we've heard from this, what the interpretations we've gotten so far from the register statement or notice, is that 2 or 3 weeks is too late. I mean, we'll already.
I'm not actually arguing for delay. I'm just not at all arguing for delay. Say, if there's something you want them to do, you should tell them, this is what you want you to do. I thought Lisa just said some of that. We need, and you can say we need more robust community engagement. I don't know all the details, Lisa.
Wasn't that, Chair Gore, wasn't that your friendly amendment?
Yeah, to take out specifically our RFP, because that limits the scope.
Yeah.
If we just say process, then that's a broader scope for the ANC to work with.
Yeah, and I think what Jim was saying would apply, even if we're talking to them just about process and not about the substance of what you do in this block or that block. Even if we're talking about process, focus on what we want, not complain about what may or may not happen.
Well, so look, I'm a little confused with it. I mean, is there a way?
And maybe I agree. I mean, I'm not that far off. My only thing is, I've always found, as a lawyer, is when the other side hasn't yet done something, you don't want to assume they've already done the bad thing. You want to tell them, we don't want you to do the bad thing. What we really do want you to do is this, because there's, oh, the path is still
Well, I
open
mean,
for
I
them
think
to do that.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, Lisa and I, and the various commissioners have been saying to them, we want a comprehensive survey of the community's views on what Jonathan has called at various times gating issues, the essential questions. Don't dance around the stuff. We want focus groups and interviews with all the various players. We want community meetings where people get to talk to each other. We want those, and we have heard when ANC commissioners have said to the city these things, we have so far gotten nothing, and we have the implication of what we're reading in the DC Register and in conversations with key officials.
I would just add one other thing. Well, an example is the cleaning on the NC 19 zone, which as far as I know, nobody had heard a word of it before they at least off the OP. You know,
There's
No.
a ton of examples. So
they never mentioned having a zone with that. kind of
let me
height.
do, Jerry Mallett's venue. He had his hand up for a while. I'll come back to you.
We've been talking a lot about what this our RFP process is. It's not a guessing game. It's all right
Exactly.
here on the web. They've done 6-hour RFPs, at least that's what they have on the web. They've all followed the same exact process. There's a big open meeting, a workshop they call it, and I'm looking at the agenda. This one has a 19-minute presentation, a 12-minute priorities, 12-minute space priorities, historic value, break into small groups, you come back and do it. And then 6 to 7 weeks later, there's a follow-up meeting, and that's it. A follow-up meeting to tell people, based on what you said, this is what we're going to do. They also have an online engagement forum for the people that can't attend the meeting. And these were both prior to COVID, so they were in person, the ones that they have the most documentation for. So it's not a guessing game. This is their process. This is what they do. I guarantee you that the agenda that's in here for, which one is this? Cromwell School is going to be exactly the same agenda. It's very similar to the process they use for the small area plan. If you remember those work groups, we broke into little work groups, we did certain things, and then somebody reports back. It's usually somebody that they hire a consultant to report back. That's the process. It's not going to change. That's the process. And McDuffie is one of the people that he did the, he knows very well what the hour RFP process is. So, Jim, when you were saying you don't know what they're going to do, we do know what they're going to do. We know exactly what they're going to do.
I built through my job at Habitat 42 homes in Ivy City, which is the area surrounding the Cromwell School. And I know that community quite well. And I was on a development team to redevelop the Cromwell School into a community center and housing. It was a little bit like this. Nothing has happened for years since that our RFP process happened.
Right, I see the timeline, 6
That's
years
right.
and we're still.
It's 6 years of nothing,
Right.
which I think we really should try to avoid. And
Why is not?
what's that?
Why is not?
To tell you the truth, I'm mystified because a developer was chosen.
Yeah.
And that developer has done nothing. And I am unaware of the lawsuits that may or may not be there.
I just want to acknowledge Jim's suggestion, and I think that that was the intention to begin with, to include a statement about what we want is to slow down the process, and what we want is to have greater community input. And any way the ANC wants to flesh it out, whether it's with surveys or with community meetings, that's a detail which I don't know we need to get into. I think the critical thing is to pass a motion that has the ANC going on record with the mayor and with the council that this process is not working for us.
And I just say that we need
Andrea had a question, her hand up.
Okay, I can write. One thing I want to note, I mean, we seem to be sort of going back and forth between asking DemPed to do a survey and engage us and have meetings. We know that is not going to be sufficient. We knew that from the small area plan, where their big meeting back in February, every single ANC commissioner afterwards, even those of you who were most supportive of the small area plan, all agreed that was completely inadequate. DemPed, like OP, is going to be coming at this. They want a certain result, all right? And they're here to get the building the way they want it, you know, pro-development. It's the ANC that is going to have to do the hard work of doing a survey, engaging the community for it to be really accurate and for people to feel heard. And it should have happened before the SAP got passed.
Yeah.
And this is why we're here now. And I mean, it was really a travesty the way this happened.
The auspices of the ANC.
Because
Not-
DemPed doesn't care.
So this is Jonathan. I'll just say one thing. I don't think anyone in the community is in favor of what's happening. I mean, I haven't heard anyone say, yeah, we're all in favor of like NC 19, NC 18. We want to push forward with that. And I think the resolution that the ANC passed on surfacing was absolutely spot on. And to the point which folks have been saying as well, if we don't say this, you know, we need to be more accommodating. I think the ANC needs to reflect the voice of the community and say, you need to put this on hold. Exactly as Lisa said, the whole process, because you haven't had community engagement and no one supports it. So I'm in favor, 100%.
Randy wanted to make a comment.
I'm gonna have to leave, but I thought this. But I've got another commitment. But if we're going to do something like that, be specific. If you're not specific, you're not gonna get anything. I mean, that's just the reality. If you just say, give us more process, give us more meetings, put all of this off for a while, you're not gonna get anything. Be very, very specific. That's the only way you're gonna get anything. I've got to go.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And for anybody on the committee who's not familiar with the RFP process, I would look at the Fletcher Johnson Community Engagement RFP on the DemPed website. Everything, all the documents, the public outreach documents, the entire process is set out with the responses from the community. So you can look at that process, and I completely agree. Using that as a basis, as an example, then we can come up with some specific recommendations about what we need to do in this process. That's not going to sound strange to them, but it's going to meet our needs. But I think, sorry,
Could you send the link around?
I could.
That would be great.
So the consensus here that we could try to word a recommendation tonight to the ANC about this.
Well, you have a vote on the floor.
Yeah, we have.
You have, a motion on the floor
Yeah.
to do the recommendation to the ANC. That's the motion, not to.
What is a consensus about whether we're gonna, should we vote on this? And
I would say you call the vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's work on the wording so that people know what the, Sorry.
I'll repeat what I've said before. I'm not.
Yeah.
And then you all can add on to it. It's passing a resolution, writing that, or transmitting that resolution to the mayor, to the council, every member of the council, indicating that we object to the process that's being pushed on us, and that we need more time and more community input, that we intend to do a survey and get that community input, and the process has to accommodate what the community, process that we envision. Now, people can add on.
It should be as simple and concise as possible.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
you need to say everything you just said, and then say what it will result in. will result in a recommendation on height, on density, on architectural design, on parking, on school burdens. We have to be very, very, as Randy said,
That's good.
very, very specific.
So what if it's, let me see if I can amend, suggested. The Zoning Design and Development Committee recommends to the ANC that it vote.
Pass a resolution.
Pass a resolution, making clear its objection to the city's process since our surplusing hearing, and believes that the move towards an RFP should be slowed down. That a community engagement process in which the ANC plays a central role should take place and include at minimum surveys, meetings, focus groups, with the aim of coming up with clear community consensus on height, density, and parking, open space, architectural compatibility, and affordable housing. Is that
That's good.
The only thing I would ask you to amend, again, your motion says from the surplusing hearing.
okay? Fair enough.
And my suggestion is to take all of that out so that the ANC can go back as far as it needs to go in the resolution.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, seriously, just
Okay.
in my viewpoint, and this was something that I've been thinking about for a while,
Okay.
because we're going to have a resolution for the surplus hearing. We have to at some point communicate to them the entire process.
So just suggest that it would be something like the process that the city has pursued for several years involving changes in the built environment of our community.
I think we're getting too vague.
Okay.
I think with that, you're just sort of saying, we don't like any of it, and they're gonna say, yeah, they've been saying that.
No, Ron, we're going to specifically in our resolution address, and it's just like what Randy, we're going to be specific. You know how our resolutions look. We're not just going to say the built environment. We're going to say SAP, boom, 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 boom. All the arguments that the community have laid out for years.
So this is
I would take a little bit of an issue because, there are two zones being proposed here. And I don't know if anybody else in this room has actually read the NC 18 or spent any time with it, but it's a very good neighborhood zone. It's a great document.
the process. that got us there.
NC 19.
Right, right.
All right, but we can complain about the whole process, but
Right.
but to say you want to throw out all the product.
No, we didn't say that. That's not what we said.
Okay, as long as we're just saying we're disappointed in the process, and we have, as hopefully we can say, as Jim's saying, an idea of specifically how to move forward.
Cal, please.
Well, I call the vote.
Okay, I will circulate the language to all of you after this, but on the motion by Jordan Benderly, modified or amended by Susan Slater and Goslin, all in, who is, how many in favor of passing this recommendation and moving it forward to the ANC?
All those in favor, raise
All
your
those in
hand.
favor.
And Anastasia's hand is up.
And you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and all opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimous.
There we go. There we go. There we go.
And I think with that, we're going to have to end because we're gonna get thrown out.
We need to tell them about the May 10th. We need to tell them about May 10th.
Okay, so this was some action that the ANC took Monday precisely because it was so frustrated with the fact that we amplified the draft zoning, but we cannot get OP to agree to come and explain to us how did they come to this decision? In particular, where did the NC 19 zone come from? How does it square with the small area plan? How does it square with the comprehensive plan? We've tried again and again and again. Lisa, the commission voted to basically set a deadline. The deadline is that we called a meeting for May 10th. We told OP that we expect them to be there
And
DEMPED. And we've set Monday as a deadline for their answer. So we're going to try to get them to explain to us where the zoning proposal came from and what the status is now. Lisa and I have heard discussions where the zoning people say, oh, well, maybe we can react in this way to the fact that there's a speed restriction. So we don't even know really quite what the form of particularly the zone, the proposed zone for this property is anymore. And we've had no luck getting them to come. So
Are you thinking of having the meeting even if they don't come?
absolutely.
That might be a good idea.
That's the word I'm
We're-
there.
we're-
The
we're
meeting's
working
been
on
set.
the word, we're going to be,
Yeah.
Can I comment? I think what I would like to see happen is not just focus on the problems we have with NC 19, which are big and important. But I think also communities should be walked through, hopefully by OP, NC 18,
Absolutely.
which is has, as I say, a lot of good stuff in it. You can see where a good neighborhood zone can take us in terms of how you impact what happens out here. But those of us that deal with this stuff all the time can read the NC 18 and have an opinion like I just had. But those of you who are not used to zoning, it's tough. And let's have a discussion. Let's go through provision by provision. It's not all that long a document. It's 10 pages, 20 pages, whatever it is, and talk about how that happens.
So the things that you had read out before, Peter, height, density, parking, open space, compatibility, affordable housing. If you want leverage with DEMPED, you already had that set. I mean, we did it back in 2019, 2020. I get it, it's 3 years old, but the community has been asked those exact questions. So I think it's your leverage to go back to DEMPED, go back to OP and say, look, we asked the community what we're expecting. This is what they said. This is what you did with the small area plan. You told everybody it was going to be MU4. You need to explain what you just said. It's like, what happened? I think I know what happened because I spoke to Erkin Osberg about it. And he said, it's always going to be about the library. We're going to put the biggest, tallest library we can in there and everything will flow from that. He was completely candid about it. So I would ask him to come and speak. Because he told this ANC MU4.
okay. So, yes.
We always talk about Jerry's 3-year-old survey. Is there a potential to revive that survey and get it to people that have moved to the neighborhood that have not taken it, and to use that as this long sought after survey that we keep talking about? Is there a way to easily reboot it?
Different time, different questions, parts of it are applicable, many parts aren't. So modified, but in the short answer is that was for them.
Thanks.
Okay, I think with that, we can adjourn and we will get paper around to you on these 2 recommendations. Thank you.
Peter,
Yeah.
Did we decide to make Jim's memo public? A couple people in the comments had asked to make that public. Is that a memo we could post on the ANC's webpage so people can see it?
Yes, yes. And indeed, I said
I'll
to,
post it on the website
we'll put it up on the website.
You know, it seemed to me that the core of the problem, that the core of the problem looks